Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second or third meeting of the Project Manager Office Hours. And I am Shelley Reed. I am the manager of the project. I don't know what I am. I am the manager of the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project. I am a white female. I have brown hair down to my shoulders, and I'm currently wearing a blazer that is covered in pink roses. So welcome. I'm glad you joined us today. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, who is going to introduce herself briefly and then lead our discussion.
All right. So my name is Heidi Banky. I am the statewide project manager with Georgia Legal Services Program. I have been a project manager in some way, shape, or form for about 13 years, but I have only had the formal title within GLSP for about 5 or 6 years. Time flies, man. Um, and I am here today to kind of lead a discussion about what we experience as project managers and what sorts of things we see where project managers really could be helpful or what things they need. I'm going to go ahead and start with let's do a uh, round robin real quick. Um, just to know, are you currently a project manager? Are you formally one? Are you considering having a project manager on your team? So let's go. I'm going to go by my screen and start with Sarah Cross.
Oh, sorry, I unmuted myself or muted myself. I'm one of these days I'll figure out how to get unmuted quickly, like the space bar. I am Sarah Cross. I'm the project manager at Lakeshore Legal Aid, which is in Michigan.
Matt Wagner.
Hi there, everyone. Matt Wagner. I am the Data Governance and Technology Specialist at the DC Bar Foundation, but in a sense, I am a project manager as well. So, hi, everyone. And then I will pass this to Ivy.
Hi, good morning. I'm Evie. I am the litigation support specialist with Columbia Legal Services out of the Wenatchee, Washington office. I'll pass it to Mary.
Oh, sorry, I just joined. What are we doing?
Introducing yourself, where you're from, and if you are a formal project manager or not.
Oh, okay. I'm Mary Pogariller. I am a project manager at Judicare in Wisconsin. I'm working on the Wisconsin Law Help website. Yes, I am a project manager for the first time. Very exciting.
Yay.
Yay.
Let's go to Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa Huerta. I am the database specialist at Neighborhood Legal Services, so I manage our legal server system. But there's a lot of project management involved with that, and I'm interested in potentially getting a certificate in project management. So, sort of just immersing myself in that world.
All right. And last but certainly not least, Christopher.
I'll be on camera for a minute. Hi, I'm Chris Cook. I am the head of project management at Legal Aid of North Carolina.
Fantastic. Um, just using the reactions in Zoom, if you are not an attorney, please raise your hand. All right. So I'm seeing we've got a good mix of attorneys and non-attorneys in the area. Um, and that was actually where I wanted to start first, because as some of you saw just before the meeting officially started, there are some issues between what a non-attorney can handle and what is expected of a project manager, especially when your company doesn't really understand what it is. So does anybody want to kick us off and talk about if they have challenges with that, if they've seen any issues with that? Just basic questions there. I can also just kick off with one of my own stories. I am not an attorney, and I am formally trained as an anthropology major. I have a master's degree in development anthropology, meaning that I have had 1 year less of education than all of the people with JDs. But I am also, that gives me a lot of credit because I understand surveys and I understand data analytics. I think some of the IT people on the call might also share that, just because you understand something that's very niche. But if you are not in that boat, a lot of attorneys think that an attorney has to look over things. And I have definitely come into conflict where I have to report to somebody and it becomes like, is it unlicensed practice of law? Is it this or that? Yes, anthropologists unite. I'm glad to have another one on here. But I find that I sometimes have to justify why the project part doesn't have to be overseen by an attorney, but the, content itself may have to be. Is that a line that anybody else has seen, and has it shown up in your work? And if you're an attorney, like, do you get pushed onto a lot of non-attorney work with your projects?
I feel like this is kind of the opposite problem, and I talked about it a little bit last time, but getting pushed onto doing a lot of the content. So I feel like my role had turned, so I'm the project manager, but my role right now is like 90% writing the content. And I don't think like I expected that. I'm not sure if the employers expected that was what I was going to be doing so much of right now. And I think some of the project management aspects have been taken away from me just so I can work so much on the content. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, and it's kind of the opposite of what I think you've experienced, but it's been interesting.
We're a recorded session. Maybe some people are scared.
While it's not attorney focused, I think that the barrier I face, even just in general, and this definitely does involve, is the same for attorneys, is managing expectations with technology, because sometimes it's always about the communication and understanding like what technology can readily achieve, what's in the budget, what will we have to put in the future, and that's been my barrier is since I don't always talk to legalese, but I could talk to technology. I could just say, we can do it, but it's going to cost more money in order to implement this. Whereas it's just trying to get attorneys to understand the processes that needs to be developed to move things forward.
And Matt, in your role, when you propose something or when you find the cost, do you have any kind of budget for your department, or do you just have to say this is what it'll cost and hope that somebody says yes or no?
So basically, I have to propose it, and then I have to submit justification for it. So, I mean, luckily for me, I have not been given the no yet, but the problem really I've been finding is that people are really excited about things, but then they miss when it doesn't fully happen, at least at the beginning. It's like, how can I mitigate that to help them understand, implementing a technology aspect there's still a lot of nuances, especially when you have good data and bad data and no systems in place.
I'm just going to read out loud. We've got a comment, definitely working with our litigation director to be more part of the budget process in 2025. Those of you who have seen me talk before or who have met me know that budgets are my soapbox. If you are with a team or if you have a grant that you work under and you don't know the budget and you don't get updates on how your expenditures are going, you are missing a key part of project management. And that might be fine at the beginning with certain things, but it really hinders your ability to know if you're on track, because so much of it revolves around how much do I have left? How much do I have left? Do these two things match up?
It's so important, especially if you're going to be the one that takes the slack when it goes over budget, right?
Right.
And nobody wants to return money to a funder at the end of a project because it didn't get spent, right? So either way, you're in a losing situation if you don't have some input on budget meetings and things like that.
If you are not a person who is involved with the budgets or receives regular updates on spending, which I'm assuming is most of you based on just how I've seen other legal aids work. Do you get any kind of communication when you are behind on projects or overspending on projects, or do you just find out at the end? Or do you never find out?
After our discussion last time, I actually talked to my supervisor and said I wanted to get more information about budget. And that I was feeling like a little left out with not getting some of this information. And she said she would she would be more open about the budget with me. So for what it's worth, yay for our discussion.
Yay!
We have had some budget problems, and I've asked to sit in on the discussions we've had with the developer about that. So I've tried to, I don't know, just be like assertive in being a part of those discussions.
How did that feel, having to go in and say, I need this?
Scary, but it's a hard conversation to have with someone, I think, to assert yourself, but good.
I'm glad it worked out. And yeah, it can be intimidating, especially if your organization is not used to being transparent. Anybody else have stories about trying to get access to the budget?
I cannot identify with that because I meet with our CFO every week.
That's
And
awesome.
we have like dashboard reporting on how many hours people are billing to it. Because how can you manage a project if you don't know where you are in the spending of it? So I'm feeling for people right now. And I wonder if maybe some of it is that in the past they've tried to communicate with some of the non-finance people and it hasn't gone well for them, so they're hesitant. Because I know sometimes, like, I have a background in accounting, so it's easy to understand what's being told to me, and I don't think that might be the same sometimes with all the departments.
And I think that also, if you have a background in it, if you have a specialty that people respect or they see the value of in certain things, sometimes you can get access to different information than other people can. Sarah, can I ask how big your team is? Like, is not your project team,
Management team?
No, your organization.
We have, I think, like almost 300 staff members now.
Okay. So you've definitely got a larger team. I was wondering if you could meet with your CFO every week because you were a smaller team, but it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's because we have so many different grants and we have to make sure that they're all being spent apportionately and not run out. Like, we're trying to spread them out across the year. So we strategically meet about that because we control some of that spending in our case management system, like how the money is allotted. But yeah, we get regular updates on any project that I'm working on. It's not always easy with the technology partners because sometimes they don't want to tell you how much of the money they've burned through. But we usually, like, we work typically with just one single person for our case management stuff. So after a year of hounding, they've just given up and they do it my way. So that works pretty well.
Perseverance.
Stop.
Expectations, once they're set, once people know what you need, if you enforce it, you've got it.
I get a burn report now, which is pretty good.
I'm so jealous of that. I don't have a burn report.
What's a burn report?
It's when you can measure the amount of money you've got left and the amount of work you've got done. So it shows how much you've burned through. It's also a fancy chart. If you get, do you get the graphic as well? I love that. It's not a thing that that's one of those things that I think is useful when you have more project management systems in place. At our last meeting, we talked about in terms of swimming, when you're at the basic stage and you're going in with, you have your floaties to secure you and you just need bits and pieces. That's not where you are. This would be at the mid to advanced level stage. Because at this point, as Sarah said, you've trained your team and you've said you're going to do it my way. That is not a place where you can start if you're just coming out or if you're still trying to gain control and access to information.
Sorry, I feel like I'm monopolizing, but in response to what Sarah said a little bit, I asked my supervisor, kind of why, as a project manager, hadn't I been more informed about some of the financial aspects of it? And she said, well, they're used to just applying for a lot of grants and they don't tell the lawyers. The lawyers don't care about that, right? They just want to do their lawyer work. And so they just want to know, did we get the money or did we not have the money? And I said, that makes sense for the lawyers. And I am a lawyer, but that's not my role here, right? I'm the project manager and I'm not doing casework here. I think for them also, they're seeing like my role is getting confused because I'm a lawyer, maybe, that has confused things a little bit. So I don't know, hopefully we'll see some changes, but.
And I want to thank Christopher because he linked a Wikipedia article for burn down charts and how to read them. I love a good graphic. I'm very happy with those. I'm also the weird bird who likes Excel a lot. So, and I think it comes down to managing expectations and communication. Show of hands, sometimes it's fear of too many cooks in the kitchen. Absolutely. Management is not just about inviting new roles to meetings, or sometimes they don't think about inviting new roles to meetings. I've definitely seen that in our case acceptance meetings that we have. Every office meets once a week to assign out new cases. There are some offices that don't allow their non-attorney staff to participate, even though sometimes the paralegals will end up with cases from those meetings. And it's just because that's the way it's always been, and no one pointed out that it needs to be that way. And again, I keep bringing it to the managing expectations and communicating about what you need, especially if you're the first one. Being assertive is definitely a thing that you need, and not in a like angry way, like give me this now, but showing like I need to monitor this project to be effective here so that you don't have to work here. This is what I need. And it might not work every time, but I think it works a lot of the time.
I think sometimes the access to finance information is often an issue of people. Some organizations keep salary information very close to the vest, and you may need to say in your out loud voice, I don't actually need salary information.
Yes. And I don't know if every organization does this, but with ours, every attorney and every member of staff has a client ID instead of it's associated with their name. So if they send me information, I can't see which staff attorney it is unless I ask for it. Is everybody, I know some of you are going to be unionized and some of you are not going to be unionized, but regardless, is everybody on this call a member of management or upper management? No. Okay. So if you are not a member of management, you will have trouble getting access to the name specific info. That being said, if your project has designated staff on it, like Heidi Banky is part of this project, I need to see what she's doing, you might be able to get that info. But if you're not a manager, you may struggle for that more.
So one thing that MAP has done is they have quarterly meetings with everyone managing TIG grants, for example. So with finance, I personally think it should be more often, but I get everything goes through me, so I know what where my project is. But that might be an approach that you can take if you're not currently involved in finance, to say, hey, can we have everyone on this kind of projects? We have a meeting and they're given an update. Might be a way to break in, at least start getting some information. Like I said, it may not be as often as you would like, but I think they can see the need when it's a group versus just one person asking for something.
I also wonder if you could just remind people that for those who are nonprofits, all that information is public anyway. If you look at the 990, if like you ask for like if they're pushing back on on getting the bulk number and they don't want to just make a simple report change, you can remind people that at the end of the day, everyone sees the 990. So I actually used that as justification to get access to financials a couple jobs ago, and it worked.
I mean, I feel like a minimum, you should be able to get access to the number of hours that a person is assigned to work on a project, if they don't want to tell you what their salary is. And to be able to see how far along they are going on that. If they have a special, like, if you're billing it to a certain grant fund or. So I think there's ways that they could give you access that are like less transparent if that's what they wanted to. They also, I mean, in my experience in management, staff start to panic a lot of times when they think funds are running out. And so some of this might be to keep like that kind of panic from overwhelming staff, because we've had kind of touchy funding sometimes in Michigan over some of our like landlord tenant stuff, and that has caused a lot of stress and staff turnover. So I think with like these more short-term grants, I think that instability could be something that they've been burned before as far as like transparency goes.
And I do think communicating about job security is definitely a thing. I mean, if you've been in legal aid or a different nonprofit situation for any real length of time, you know that it's funded by some kind of grant, and you know that grant funding will continue to come in some way, shape, or form. But especially if you're a newer hire, if you're not used to seeing grants or talking budgets, people can feel like, okay, well, what's happening next? And I've had that before. We had with our newest project, it was a 2-year grant. And so the person was very concerned about what happens at the end of the 2 years. And I said, you're going to be fine. We'll cover it. And then very heavily involved her in the grant writing process for anything that might involve it. Because she was also a project manager, she's my supervisee, she could see a lot of the background stuff and understand it, but you could still have communication about like, hey, we're going to try this project. And then when she's now been a formal project manager for about 2 years, so her grant's almost up. But now that she has developed her own project management personality and her expertise and separated herself from me a little bit more, the program now sees her value and can find ways to say, we're going to support this no matter what. And I think that's part of the project management process, is to prove what you're able to do and to show how projects flourish under you.
Can I ask a question? And I'm not sure if this was answered already, maybe in a meeting that I wasn't able to attend, but we don't have anybody with the title project manager in our organization. And so I'm sort of wondering, what type of projects do you all that do have that formal title, like what is a project manager in a legal aid space? Like we have grants and we have a grant manager, and I'm wondering if maybe that's sort of comparable in the role or not, but I'm just wanting to sort of understand like the formal grant manager title, like what is it that project manager title, what is it that you're managing?
So by definition, a project is a temporary endeavor that produces a service, product, or result. It is meant to be like a grant is temporary. At least if it's renewed, then each time is technically a different grant. as a grant manager, what you're going to be focused on mostly is managing the relationship with the grantor, the deliverables of the grant you might seek updates on, and a lot of the funding stuff you might be watching, but you may not be watching the project itself. The project manager role, and anybody can step in and correct me if you've had a different experience, focuses a lot more on the stakeholders and getting the work done and calling the meetings and making sure the deliverables are on time. You may work with the grants manager or with your accounting department to monitor certain pieces of information like the finances and budget, but when you're the project manager, you're much more focused on the details of the scope. A grants manager in an organization may be responsible for all the grants in your organization, so they are not going to get that in the weeds.
Got it. So it sounds like for us, it's more like the managing attorneys that are doing the grant manager role in a way because they're the ones responsible for making sure that their specific grants are being met, their deliverables are being met, all of that. And I doubt they have access to financial stuff.
Right, and
Okay.
they would not have the
Yeah.
capacity to do all of the nitty-gritty with a project day to day.
Yeah, and I think that's where the difficulty is in our organization where the managing attorneys are always like, I can't manage legal work, I can't manage projects and like making sure that we're meeting deliverables. I can't do all this admin type supervisorial type roles. And so they're just like, where do I focus my attention? But now I see where a project manager role would come in.
Right.
Got it. Thank
Can-
you.
May I add something? Hi.
Absolutely.
So my title is not project manager. I'm director of strategic initiatives, but some of the projects that I've worked on that needed project management was a construction rehabilitation on one of our buildings.
Mhm.
We set up a separate entity that was a 2.5-year project that I'm only just now handing off. We did a move of half of our staff into a different building. So these are just some of the types of projects that I've had to use real project planning skills for.
And I want to say construction and IT are probably the areas where project management is most developed and there's the most research and support available. So yes, those are definitely areas where you'll see it. In the chat, quite often a project manager does not have a title. That's especially true in legal aid. They add it to somebody else, or in the grant, they're called the project manager, but that's not what they're really called in the real world. They can be assigned another role and then assigned a project to be in charge of. So that's, yeah, it's usually tacked on. I love that we have a strategic planning person in here.
God got me back for making fun of strategic planners my whole life, and that's what I do now. So yes. But
Yeah,
that also, right? Implementing a strategic plan, that's a 4-year process, right? And I'm
yes.
constantly having to move it forward without doing the work myself, right?
Yeah, and then I think a lot of people see strategic planning as very fixed, like we're going to do this. And I think people who get more involved with it understand how it's very fluid and it updates. And you get to, like, if you're going to make a change, you're going to have to make sure everybody knows what the change is. But yeah, happy strategic planning. But yeah, so there's the difference, Melissa. And I think there's a reason why some organizations like the one I mentioned earlier try to say, oh, you're going to be in charge of all the projects. That's too much. And yes, you get to move forward with the concept of your plan. Hopefully it's of your plan. It's really a lot more fun when you get to take an idea from start to finish. Frequently something gets foisted upon you. But it is definitely taking an idea and moving it from start to finish. And a lot of it is communication and a lot of it is people management and those HR skills, which is funny because you're managing the project, not the people directly. So sometimes it's a lot of convincing. And I think a good training that I want to do maybe later this year, maybe next year is about influencing and power struggles and things like that. Definitely types of organizations and how to navigate different hierarchical structures. Because yeah, it's tricky. You have to know how to negotiate, and you're doing it if you're not if you're not an attorney, you're doing it with people who've like been trained on how to do this. I think another big area to discuss is stakeholders and managing your team. Just so that we're all on the same page, the team are the people actually doing the work. The stakeholders are the people who can impact or are impacted by the work. So sometimes you get some stakeholders who are really against what you're doing. Technology people definitely know this. Change management with leadership and stakeholders is fun, even with buy-in. Absolutely. My fun story about technology change and staff resistance is I started my position with GLSP, not this position, but my first one with GLSP in late 2013, just as they were about to switch to an updated computer system, which no longer allowed them to use WordPerfect. And we absolutely have people who are still mad about the fact that they can't use WordPerfect anymore. And it's not a supported system. Like at a certain point, learn Word, understand it. But yeah, how to herd a cat, colloquially. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, does anybody else have some fun stories where they've tried to get people on board and have faced absolute, I guess, brick walls
I
from
don't,
other
I've
people? Go
actually
ahead.
really struggled with the stakeholders quite a bit. Like I can't figure out, I feel like Goldilocks or something. Like I don't involve them enough, or I ask them to do too much. And if I ever ask them to do anything, they don't ever do it, even though they want to be involved. I somehow like never reach the right golden amount of, I don't know, involvement with them somehow. I'm really struggling. I do struggle a lot with the stakeholders. It's a big problem for me.
I'm also part of our IT department, so I feel the like user adoption story fun real hard. And to be honest, the most effective method I've ever found is user adoption by jealousy. I just don't try to convince people. I announce that this is a thing that we are looking into. All of my power users who see the value in the new tool will show up and ask to be part of the early testing and ask to get feedback and ask to be involved in the process. They get all of those things and they get a lot of extra attention while we go through testing. And
Yeah,
then I wait for the next group of people to show up and say, well, we don't have the shiny toy. It especially works when we stop supporting the old system we used to be using and it starts to develop gremlins, because all server systems develop gremlins if they do not constantly receive care and feeding and love and screaming. And so just, I've got the last 20% of staff who need to be drug kicking and screaming over the line. But at that point, something like 80% of staff has moved over. And it's a much stronger position to come to staff who do not want to do this thing with the entire rest of the organization is using it. They're able to use it without problems. So but it's too hard or your documentation isn't good enough excuse is gone. And by then, most of leadership is already involved in using the new system. And so that's just if I'm going to have a grudge match with some intractable staff who do not want to be moved, that's just an easier position to do this from than trying to go to those people at the outset. Also, because I've been doing this for like 7-ish years now, I've had the opportunity over time to under the table train staff that if they want a say in how the thing happens directly as opposed to filtered through surveys, but like if they want to be there to watch it happen and make sure that their particular interests are addressed by being able to like talk to the dev staff directly, they got to play ball. And that turned into some of our most strident anti-new tool people turning into our greatest champions by them just showing up and seeing how the sausage is made, and getting to be involved in that process. I've got a few who just would rather be doing this with sticks and clay tablets, and we do our best with them. But like, don't just never underestimate the power of jealousy to motivate change. It is just so much easier to push a rock downhill.
And competitiveness, I would throw that one in there too. Some people want to be the first one to learn and look like they're more knowledgeable about something. That is a really good strategy. I think I've seen where you divide staff into 4 categories. You've got the early adopters, the ones who are, well, you know, they're leaning yes, the ones leaning no, and the people who are the smoke signals and sticks and tablets people. You don't have to worry about the early adopters. They're going to be excited about it no matter what. So you focus on the ones who are leaning yes, who will be positive about it. And then you've got 2 of them there. And then the leaning no's might take a little influence, but then they'll drag the rest of the people with them. I do want to make sure I'm keeping the chat in there. Ooh, fun one. I would be happy if I could get the attorneys to enter time in legal server on a regular basis. Absolutely. We had back in the day where this probably was more allowed, but now is not allowed because of obvious reasons. We had a director of finance, and this was way back in the day, who would just flat out say, if you don't enter your time, you don't get paid. And they would get their paycheck afterward if they filled it in. It's not like they wouldn't get paid and they just missed out, but that was pretty effective. Let me see, some ways people have dealt with that is they had a report on timesheets sent out everyone, so they got public shaming for non-compliance, and policies that can be enforced up to losing your job. So, you know, some sticks instead of carrots. Public shaming is the way to go. HR person would send mass emails. In my organization right now, there is an email reminder that goes out every 2 weeks. And then the accounting person will call you directly. And I think they may also contact your supervisor in some of those cases. So there's multiple levels of people checking in on you. Let me see. I do a pop-up reminder with a funny meme every Friday and Monday. That seems to be helping. I'm going to start offering sticks and clay tablets to those who would prefer not to get on board. Yeah, I think maybe if you got a stick and tablet squishy and handed them out to certain people, that might be funny. But definitely, I mean, find, when it comes to stakeholders, the people who are on your side, who are very excited about the project, and use them to help influence the other people. Another thing that Christopher mentioned was showing, like, involving people in the process. If you are just having meetings and expecting to have people respond, and they haven't really been trained to do that in the past, one way to engage them more is to make sure that your follow-up emails reference where they had the opportunity to provide impact. So if you have a survey that you sent out and you only got 3 responses out of 10 people who should have responded, you say, hey, based on what I got in this survey, these are the priorities, so this is where I'm going. And enough actions like that will start to bring in the people, because they know, like, this is where you got the information. And if they say that this isn't how they want it, well, you had the opportunity. Why didn't you give me the feedback? Did anyone come with questions today that they want to discuss? Did you have anything that you were hoping to talk to today or learn about?
I do have something.
Go for it.
Me being in a position where, like I said, I'm not a formal project manager, but with the database, I have a lot of projects I'm sort of leading through and helping improve our system. It's sort of like project managing myself because I don't have a team. It's just I need to make sure these projects move forward and I'm staying on top of it. Does anybody have like any tools or suggestions that they can share on a plan that keeps you going, like I don't know, a link to something or something that I can use like as a template every time I'm gonna start something new. Like this is what I'm gonna do. And I mean, I do use the OneNote and I have different tabs and stuff, but I don't think it's as effective as it can be. So just wondering like if anybody knows of any tools or strategies.
Um, I would highly recommend we have the recording of the previous session because it gives a couple of things that you can use early on, and there's actually a decent amount of templates. Microsoft Planner, I've just gotten to use that and I absolutely love it. Christopher has a project charter form. Christopher, would you please send that to Shelly so she can upload the form into our database? Asana is a rate, Trello, Asana. There's a lot of different software that can help. And I also am asking Shelly, can you put a link to the folder where we have all of those templates accessible? But there are a host of templates that we have created, and I encourage other people to also send them to Shelly so that way we can have all sorts of different things. I know there is a kickoff form in there. I know there is a form to help you manage stakeholders, risk assessment, um, a sample meeting agenda, a sample debrief form, and the recording will show you more of when those are appropriate. But yeah, there's definitely some different software. The recording, I didn't recommend any software because I know that there's a lot and people have different preferences. But in the recording, I also did say like what to look for in a software. Um, Microsoft Project for Web is a lot better than it was a few months ago. Yes, absolutely. I wish I had the project app for that one. I don't seem to have it. Um, Excel, like not Excel, all Office products seem to work better in the app than they do online. Um, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it wrong. Is it Evie?
It is Evie.
Yes.
Thank you. In that same vein, so I am trying to figure out how to track attorney benchmarks. So we have benchmarks for the first 6 months, year, 2 years, up to 7 years. And the purpose is to ensure that our attorneys are getting opportunities and also becoming proficient in those opportunities. But I haven't found a great way to do that and to be able to not only track attorney benchmarks, but also see the entire picture, the big picture in one space. Does anyone have a recommendation for that sort of project?
If you don't have an HRIS that does that for you, Viva Goals is fairly cheap if you're on the nonprofit pricing and sort of does OKRs at different levels, which is like objective results. And so you can set up each individual user with objective key results, tie those to the objective key results at the departmental level and sort of go all the way up. And it's pretty good at like letting you track individual progress towards those and see how each of those relates. What it really wants to be used for is to like set like we will increase unrestricted funding by 50% in the next year, and then everybody like feeds in all the different activities they're engaged in that supports that goal so that you can see what everybody's up to with relationship to a particular goal. But you can turn it on its head and work it from the ground up and set a series of objectives for an individual person.
Christopher, just because I think you and I are more familiar with all the acronyms, would you mind explaining like HRIS and okay?
Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I am like knee deep in an HRIS project right now.
Yeah.
So HRIS is a human resources information system. It's a case management system for your staff. What is all the key information about the people who work on your staff that's meant to help an HR department manage all of that, from like when were they hired, how much have they been paid, what was their last evaluation like, how many languages do they speak, at what proficiency level, all of that good stuff. So like if you have one of those, tracking performance indicators or goal attainment should be part of it. If it's not, because like currently we're trying to kind of do the same thing in work with what we got until we can get an HRIS put in place. OKRs are, I mean, it's objective key result. It's thing you want to accomplish by a particular time. And if you look, I think Viva Goals is like $1.50 per month per user. And so like there's a significant cost barrier if you want to turn that on for every single person in your organization. But if you're mostly concerned with people in their first year or two of being with the organization, you could just hot potato those licenses as people age out of needing that kind of tracking. And you can set up about a year's worth of results for each person, and it allows folks to go in and update them. I'm not sure how well it allows you to segregate. It's really intended to make that information super easy for people to see, and Microsoft can get unhappy when you try to take a platform that they created for transparency and make it more private, which you might want to do if what you're doing is tracking someone's, like, essentially their performance progress as a new employee. But it was pretty easy to figure out and start using. So that might be a tool if you're already in the Office 365 ecosystem.
And Evie, I'm looking into the 3 options you gave. It looks like they are HRIS, but I feel like whoever your HR people and or your accounting people may already have a system that they use, and those features, especially the human resources ones, may have expansion packs that are more advanced for HRIS systems, and or they already may have them available and are just not using them. We have Paylocity, and I know it's got some availability to track benchmarks and performance as long as people enter the information.
We have all 3 of these for different purposes, which, yeah. So that's probably not the best idea. And so that's one of the issues is I'm trying to figure out, okay, why do we have so many different things that potentially, you know, do or can do the same thing? Clipchamp we're using for things like the 360 reviews. Bamboo HR is for onboarding and information regarding, you know, insurance and things like that on the HR side. And then Asset Panda is currently being used to track our assets. So monitors, desks, yeah. So if anybody has a suggestion as to which one of these would be best for all 3 of those types of information, I would love that as well, because different departments are using each of these in different ways.
I mean, I'd at this point be recommending a project just to like evaluate them and see if you can consolidate anyone anywhere. Because you're probably spending a decent amount on all 3 when one of them could probably do everything.
Right.
But in terms of which one to choose, I think it depends on what your benchmarks are. If your goal is to identify when somebody has participated in a conference, and if you want to make it egalitarian so that everyone gets a chance, you're going to have to link it to probably accounting, who's going to have the forms and whatnot about like when people have been selected and they go to a conference and they get the reimbursements for it. If your goal is to monitor and rank people's performance based on case data, you're going to have completely different metrics that you're going to look at. So I think that's where to start, is what is your goal, and then figure out the data that would most get you to the answer to that.
Right. Thank you. In this project of trying to figure out what to use for benchmarks, this is basically turning into the larger project that you just mentioned of analyzing all of these. This is how I'm finding out that we have so many different systems. And our accounting department is using a completely different system, which is ancient and needs to be updated, called MIP, which I'd be surprised if anybody here has even heard of that.
I have
that
not.
Kind of like We're Perfect, you know?
Okay.
Or, what was even before that?
So in the Google Drive that Shelly shared, there is I don't remember what I called it, but essentially it's a contract evaluation template. it is a document that we brought all of our stakeholders together. So it would be your finance team, your HR team, your whatnot, where they talk about what features are most important to them. And then you communicate with the vendors about the questions that were important to your team. And then you can compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges about who's preferring what. But I think seeing a sample of that might help guide your team in having the conversation. And if I'm assuming you want to go with one of the existing ones instead of getting an RFP and bringing out external ones. But if you did choose to go external, you could use the same form.
Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Any other burning questions? I know we have 7 minutes left, so. Why don't we stop the recording and see if that helps anybody?
So thank you for joining us today. We are back from having our little pause so we could have an unrecorded conversation. But we hope that you find this helpful, and we'll see you next month on November 12th. And then next year we'll start making our schedule and you'll be able to find out when we'll be meeting. Thank you.